Well, it's my favorite time in the garden. Not everything is perfect or in place this year. I guess it never really is. But the tulips are out. I feel guilty because they're possibly my favorite flower, and I don't really do all that much to help them grow. I just plant the bulbs. These tulips may be around for a few more weeks, but this is prime time. Today we're celebrating the dazzling colors and endless variety of tulips as we enter May. In this garden I grow different types of tulips, so let's dive in and take a look. Well, I'm here in the North Garden surrounded by all kinds of tulips with vibrant colors. May is the peak time for tulips for me, and as they create a breathtaking display, that's very hard to resist. Tulips are native to Central Asia and were first cultivated by the Ottoman Empire before they were brought to Europe, where they became a symbol of wealth and prestige during the Dutch Golden Age. And now they're here at PDX Garden Home.
There are over 3,000 registered varieties of tulips, which can be classified into 15 groups based on their flower shape and blooming period. Some popular types include the classic single tulip, the peony-flowered tulip, and the lily-flowered tulip. I also grow species tulips. Take a closer look at some of these exquisite beauties. This is what I think of as a classic tulip, an Apeldoorn. Over here we have a peony-flowered tulip. And this is a lily-flowered tulip with a slim, pointed shape and vibrant color. Tulips are grown from bulbs. I plant these each autumn between late September and into November. These are one of the simplest flowers I grow. Just dig a hole about 3 times the depth of the bulb, and don't forget, place the bulb with a pointed end facing upwards. Then I simply wait for the magic to happen come springtime, and here we are.
Once your tulips have bloomed, there are a couple things you can do to prepare for next year. First, you deadhead any spent flowers, and that'll encourage the plant to focus its energy back into the bulb. Secondly, you can allow the foliage to die back naturally after flowering, and that would help the bulb store energy for the following year. All that being said, in prior videos I've mentioned my lack of success when it comes to regrowing tulips a second year. Case in point, I dug up well over 100 tulips last summer after the tulip foliage had died back, and then replanted in this front area, which I'll show you here, in a big trench. Yet as you can see, there are very few here and that have come up, and that certainly is not the 100 that I planted.
This week's harvest included asparagus, radish, arugula, and chives.
Well, we had a heat wave here at PDX Garden Home. We actually hit 80 degrees on one day and over 80, maybe like 85 degrees on another day. Now it's supposed to cool back down to normal kind of spring weather, kind of be in the 60s, low 70s. But that's why we've got the shades pulled here in the greenhouse, and we got to do some watering. I was watering during those days, but even in the aftermath for the day after, and it's not that warm today, but I still got to get some watering in here for these plants. And you know, a lot of people did things to prepare, like put extra shade cloth over plants outside, or take plants in, or things of that nature. I didn't. You know, I think I just didn't have the time. So it's like, well, they'll either survive or they won't survive. And I got out here and got some watering in to help them kind of weather it, so to speak. But we'll see. Some things have lasted. And as we do a tour of the nursery later, you'll see some things worked and some things didn't.
Well, planting over what was really the last 2 weeks, I've been putting lupine in the ground, impatiens, carnations, status, stock, columbine, sweet peas. That's on the flower side. With veggies, I've been putting in kale, broccoli, cauliflower. I'm really only listing what I actually planted, which is affected by my schedule as much as the season or the temps. So there's a lot of other things that you could be planting besides what I've done here. In terms of seeds, I planted calendula and marigold seeds.
I call this my nursery operation, but it's a private nursery. I don't sell plants, although I occasionally give them away. I used to feel a lot of pressure on getting all these plants into the ground, potted up, or else growing the seedlings seemed like a waste. But I don't feel that way anymore. For me, now growing the seedlings is about creating a palette that I have to paint with out here. I don't have to use all the paint in the palette. It's there to give me options for creativity and set about filling up the garden now. That's what I tell myself anyway. Of course, I still feel a twinge of guilt, particularly when I have open space and I've got old and dried out seedlings that never got planted. But that's a function of not having enough time to fill the canvas. Okay, I guess I've stretched the painting metaphor enough, particularly since I don't actually paint. But I did, like many, watch episodes of Bob Ross just for the soothing aspect of it. Okay, let's start in the back here. We'll go around the outside of the greenhouse and then the inside of the greenhouse just to kind of share what I've got going on here. So, and some of these are repeats in different locations, but here I've got some leftover sweet peas. I've got a place I want to put them. I've already planted most of my sweet peas, but I got this extra tray that still needs to go out. And here is a tray of kind of dilapidated bluebells. I think it'll be a low growing ground cover if I could actually get it going properly, but this is an example of where it may have gotten dried out or just not treated well, and well, here we are. Back over here, I do have some things that I think are doing well. These are Lysianthus here, and they can be pretty hard to germinate in general. And so this tray here, skip this tray, and then this tray here, these are both Lysianthus, and I'll show you I have a few more trays of it as well. So I'm hoping they come out and they work well, because the Lysianthus blooms are kind of like a rose without all the thorns, so it's kind of cool. I've got a lot of snapdragons going on here, but this is a tray that never got potted up, and as you can see, they're pretty dried out and dying here. So yeah, that's a casualty. Here's some salvias, and I think these will do okay if I can get them put out into the ground at some point soon. Now, these are snapdragons, and I have multiple trays of these, as you'll see, where I had taken them out of, we took them out of the cell trays and put them into, potted them up essentially. And some of them have taken and are kind of growing up, and some of them are kind of struggling since we did that. Some more of the bluebells that aren't doing well right now. These are some violas Violas are pretty tough, so I think what I might do with these is, they got dried out and they're a little bit scraggly. What I might do is just cut them all back and then let them kind of regrow fresh so they look nice. Here's more of the snapdragons that are kind of struggling to carry on after transplants. You can see, you know, there's some that are doing just fine, and there's some that didn't make it at all. Back over here, I've got some more, what are these? These are pansies. They've taken a while to grow. I think they didn't get properly fertilized was probably the reason. These are some more pansies, same thing. This is newer planting, so these are small because they are, as they should be, because they're new. This is alyssum, so this will hopefully carry on and be fine. These bigger pots are things that I overwintered in the greenhouse. These are painted daisies, and this is a craspedia. It'll produce a stick with a little yellow bulb on it, or a ball on it essentially, if it blooms properly here. Over here, this is a lupine, and I have had several lupines which we've planted out, but this one is doing well. It was overwintered from last year. And of course, more snapdragons. I went snapdragon crazy, but not in a way that is going to produce a lot given my low success rate in the transplanting here. Over here, this, you know, and more examples of things that have failed. Like this is died off here, didn't get watered enough. Maybe if I cut it back a little bit, it might regrow if I treat it well. I'm not sure what this is. It says status, but it's not the way I think status usually grows. So unless it's just a variety that I wasn't familiar with, maybe, but I'm not sure that is status. I'm not sure what that is. These are over here Cape marigolds, and they'll produce a kind of a nice little flower. I grow them every year. This isn't bad. These will be fine. I typically don't pot them up. I typically have just put the cells directly in the ground, but I might go ahead and pot them up. They can go in any time. They just haven't because of not having enough time at this point. Okay, so we're gonna curve around here. We get into some of the veggies I've got going on here. I've already gotten many of these kinds of veggies in the field, and so these are like second rounds or third rounds. So these are beets here. Another round of snapdragons here. These are kind of a mix of different brassicas. There's some kale, red cabbage, and some kohlrabi in there. Looks like, I think this is chard. I have chard in here, and then I've got some younger cabbages in here. They may be too young to actually be something that I can get in the ground and mature for the spring or summer, but they maybe at this size or whatever, if I get them in the ground in the next month, they can be ready for a fall cabbage. This is some cool weather crops that are not faring well due to the heat, so it'll be interesting to see what happens here. These were lettuces here, just a kind of a mesh. Well, it says bib lettuce on it here, so this was bib lettuce. And this over here is white bok choy. I got white bok choy from a seed provider. I don't want to say which one because I don't want to disparage them, because I'm not sure if it's the seed company or if it's me. But ever since I've been growing bok choy from that seed, about a year ago, I tried them last year. All my bok choy just keeps bolting, and so maybe it's the variety isn't what I'm used to growing here. I'll tell you, the seed provider is not Botanical Interest. That's where I've gotten bok choy in the past, and it's worked out okay. There was a different seed provider for that. This is some violas. Well, actually it says pansies here, but I can tell there's some violas mixed in here. So it looks like I got some pansies and some violas. Similar to what I was saying about my violas around the corner there, this could be probably trimmed down or cleaned up and let it like regrow, and it might do better that way. Here's what I'm really happy about, these Lisianthus here. You can see here, I showed you a couple of trays around the corner, but yeah, these are doing well. And you can see I've got one that's actually started to flower here. But yeah, I expect these are doing well. I'm trying to decide if I will keep them, we'll go ahead and plant them from these pots straight into the ground or into large pots around the yard in places where they're supposed to be, or if I might pot them up one more time just to really baby them because they are so precious. This is a tray of snapdragons. You can tell it's doing a little bit better than the one that totally dried out, but it is very overcrowded and would do well to either be planted out or potted up. These are Zulu Prince Cape Marigolds, Zulu Prince daisies. I love these. I planted them last year. The flower gets bigger when it's properly planted, and it really develops more of a blue. It's hard to see here in these kind of little stunted flowers, but it'll develop kind of a blue center to it, which is wonderful. These need to either be potted up or put out as well. These pots are not really part of the nursery per se because they're here year round, but these are mints that are here. So I grow a little bit of mint, and then we will jump around the corner to see the other outdoor part of the nursery going on. Okay, the other section of the outdoor section of the nursery here. So we've got a bunch of violas here. These were potted up to see if I could grow them out more. They're getting a little bit leggy, but they're flowering nicely. So the trick to dealing with violas that get leggy, of course, is to just chop them down, because as you can see, like on this one here, it's got these nice, these long, I wouldn't say nice, but it's got these long stems, but then down here it's already got growth at the base. So I could chop this off and it'll regrow, and these would all pretty much regrow if I kind of chopped them down to the base, and I might get them more bushied out and then be more prepared for transplanting out where I want them. I haven't really decided where to put them. They can go out anytime now, so there's no reason to not have them in the ground other than me not having decided where they go. More snapdragons over there. This is something I really like, and it's a shame that I haven't been able to get it, and it's turned into kind of you can tell it's turned into a bushy mess here as well. This is lobelia, and so this lobelia needs to be planted out, trimmed up and planted out and fixed somehow. Those are more salvias back there. Snapdragons there. I think these are some more salvias here. This is more Cape Marigolds I was showing around the corner. This is Sweet William. And I've grown it years ago, but not recently. So I got to remind myself of how it grows, where it's best used, and figure out where I want to put it. This is Status here. And well, there you go. Lo and behold, there's a flower. I know this is Status, and there's a flower in it that looks like the other one that I was questioning whether it's Status. So I guess maybe that's a type of Status. This is the kind of flower that I'm used to seeing on Status, which to me looks different than this. So I don't know if maybe it's just a varietal thing. Phlox. Okay, yeah. And I've really loved growing these in the past when I've made them work. So these look like they'll be doing okay. They probably should be potted up as well. You can see a theme around here. I'm behind in potting things up or putting them out. This is what I call the fairy flower or linaria. So these will stay really small and grow lots of different multicolored little flowers off them, which I think is cool. This is more of the African marigold, kind of small little daisy flowers. So that's it for the outside. Let's take a look and see what's going on in the greenhouse. Okay, well, I'm running out of room in the greenhouse because I've still got the patio furniture in here, so I need to get that out so we've got more room for dealing with things. But I don't know. I mean, it may get too warm in here for things in the greenhouse before I need all the room anyway. We'll see how it goes. But what do I have going on in here? Well, I've got lots of peppers. So those are trays of peppers that we recently just potted up there. More peppers in the red cups that you see along there. But on the top shelf here, we've got, this is Saplogosis, and it's not the flowers. It was flowering. I cut it back to here because it had bushed out and it was just too big, and there's still cell trays. It was too big for being in the cell trays, but Saplogosis likes warm weather, and it's not generally warm enough outside. You know, notwithstanding the 80 degrees that we had here last week, it's not generally warm enough outside right now for it. So I'm hoping to get it in the ground later. Similar, I've got my petunias, which have been potted up, and these things are amazing. So looking at these tulips here, so these were in the small 6 cell trays just 2 to 3 weeks ago, and I transplanted them into these cups and I cut them down. I mean, I swear that most of these petunias were no more than like 2 to 3 inches tall and had no flowers on them 2 weeks ago, because they did have flowers on them, but they were like, you know, 2 feet, 1 to 2 feet in length. They were just very leggy, lots of flowers, and so I cut all that back in order to be able to transplant them, and hopefully was hoping they would survive and thrive and do better if they were kind of brought back to a size that could easily be transplanted into these cups before they go outside. And lo and behold, they are doing amazing. Now, they like heat, so they're doing great in the greenhouse right now, and they will not go out until my tomatoes essentially go out. Okay, so here I've got my Cosmos. I just planted those from seed a couple weeks ago, so they're relatively new. They're about where they should be here. Ideally, I'd maybe pot them up, or depending on where the weather is, I might just get them straight in the ground. I'm not going to go over every tray because some of these trays are just repeats of things, and so as I go along here, so I'll just try to hit things that I haven't talked about before. This is Nicotiana, which I planted last year. I loved it. My wife, not so much, didn't think it was that great, but I just think it's unique and interesting, and it's got these nice little flowers that just keep producing once it gets established in the garden. It is an annual for us here, for me here anyway. So I'm planning to pot these up and then get them out in a location, maybe not as much of a prime location as they were last year, since I'm the one who likes them and nobody else in the family necessarily likes them, but we'll see. Over here, I've got stevia. I'm a little bit proud of this because I typically grow stevia from getting starts from like a farmer's market, because they are, for me, it's always been fairly hard to germinate. But I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stevia plants here, which I germinated from seed, and I have nursed all the way up to this stage. Big enough, all the way up to this stage, big enough that I can actually take a leaf and snack on it. And that is the sweet leaf, the sugar substitute plant that you may be familiar with. Okay, over here what we have is impatiens. I've already planted a full tray of these out in a kind of a shady area. They're kind of an odd plant to me in the sense that they both like shade and they like heat at the same time. So I typically don't plant them out till it gets warmer. I typically plant them in an area that is not full sun. I guess, I don't know if you can plant them in full sun. Maybe you can. I just know that they also work in shade, and I'm always looking for things to fill my shady areas with. So whether they can work in full sun or is not relevant to me. The fact that they can grow in shade is all that matters, because it means I'm going to put them in the shade because I don't have a lot of other stuff that I grow to put in the shade. These are peppers you can see in the 6 cell trays that need to get potted up still. These are tomatoes. I just planted my tomatoes from seed back in, I would say, late March. And they've been kind of slow going for me, but these will do okay once I pop them up and kind of bury the stems a little bit. And now that they're outside, they'll probably do just great. Up above here are eggplants, which I start earlier than tomatoes because they just take a longer hot season. Also some dahlias mixed in there. Here in the eggplants for me had already started flowering. I'm just coming along and pinching the flowers off because it's no good for these plants to be carrying flowers or fruit when they're in this size or at this stage. These are all dahlias grown from seed. So I do have some dahlia tubers that I'm behind in actually putting into pots to kind of get them going again. Tubers that were from last year that I dug up. I did not buy any more tubers this year. I really enjoy growing dahlias from seed. I haven't found dahlias from seed that are the large dinner plate varieties though. So to get the really like large ones, those large spectacular heads, you have to use tubers that I buy. But these ones grow really nice flowers that are probably, I don't know, they're about this size or so. I mean, the heads could be the size of a golf ball to a baseball on these ones that I grow from seed, and that's just fine. And they do pretty well. They are a little bit late maturing for me, at least the way I grow them. So they usually are not going to be flowering until late July into August is earliest at that time. This is Coleus, which you may know as kind of that kind of very vibrant and colorful leaf plant that you see in a lot of pots or different flower borders and arrangements. This is looking a little bit dilapidated because I watered it down and maybe watered it a little too hard. It'll come back. These are celosia, which are a different kind of flower. And then back here, these are hollyhocks, which hollyhocks do not produce in the first year. So that's a longer term investment. It's a biennial. So I'll get them in some place where they'll stay and then they'll produce ideally flowers for us next year. Yeah, that's for the most part what we got. We got some small amounts of, this is delphiniums. I've planted those in the past. They become perennialized. I love them, but I found it hard to germinate them and grow them from seed reliably, but I'm always giving it a go. I'm always trying again. Down there at the bottom there, what you see are some morning glories. Yeah, it seems a little bit crazy to grow those from seed. I've heard some people who will see that I have morning glories in trays and they'll say, hey, isn't that invasive? Not here. I planted them every year and they die, as vining flowers, and they die off in my flower beds, and they don't come back for me the next year on their own. So that's that. Okay, well, I hope you've enjoyed this quick nursery tour. I don't know if it was that quick, but this nursery tours, you see all the different plants that I have going. You may notice there's not a ton of veggies in here. That's because most of the cold hardy veggies were already put out into the beds, cabbages and some lettuces and broccolis and kales and that sort of thing, spinach, all of the turnips. I could just keep rattling those off. You don't see those in the nursery here for the most part. You saw a little bit of veg, but not a lot. And you may think, well, hey, I thought this guy likes to grow veg. What you don't see, you're overwhelmed by flowers here, but that's because there's a lot of trays of peppers and eggplants in here if you're kind of looking around that and seeing that. But you're overwhelmed by flowers because my tomatoes, for example, are in 6 cell trays. So I'm growing a lot of tomatoes, but they're in a small space right now until I start potting them up into bigger pots. So yeah, definitely growing lots of veg. It's just that at this point or this time of the garden, that's not what is dominating my nursery space here. I do have some lettuces and bok choys in the basement nursery that I'm not sharing with you here because that's down there and I'm up here outside. And I'll bring them outside and those will go in the ground the next week or so as part of my cool weather crop rotation. All right, everyone.